Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms where I give you a heads up about upcoming shows and which date and time they will be aired. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the shows, MP3 files which you can download, or links to your favorite platform like iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and all other major sources. You can find information for upcoming and past talk show appearances as well as new book projects at MarlenePardo.com. You can also purchase books and merchandise there. And you can visit my author page on Amazon at Marlene Pardo Pellicer. Due to popular demand, I'm narrating my True Believer stories that I've collected throughout the years in a new series called Supernatural Storytime. You can find links at supernaturalstorytime.com. If you are into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate some of those at Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If you would like to read noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com. I do want to thank you all for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How is everybody doing? Good, I hope. Today I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing great. I know a lot of people have asked me, how's the micro farm coming along? It's coming along. A lot of rain here in South Florida, which I'm very happy about. It gets in the way of doing a lot of stuff, but it's great when you're into farming, as I've said before. But anyway, let's get on to the really important stuff, which is who the guest is. Or guests. In this case, we have two for the price of one. Okay, and this is a couple. Their name is Brian and Linda Purdy, and they are the co-founders of Elite Vegas Paranormal Society, which they established back in 2008. And they are paranormal investigators, and usually what they do is, like a lot of paranormal investigators, is help families who are in need of assistance with paranormal activity. Along with their son David, they've been featured on Ghost Adventures, Aftershocks, and David Purdy was a cast member in the hit WeTV series Ghost in the Hood. Now, as you could tell, and you know, I've spoken about this before, about groups that last, that have a history, because nowadays a lot of groups get together and within the first 12 or even 24 months, that's it. Their history, they fall apart, either lack of experience or people, it's just, they believed the hype of some of the paranormal shows, and they didn't realize that a lot of times you go on investigations that either they're boring or nothing happens, and then it's like, wow, this is nothing like what I saw on TV. So again, you know, I'm very excited when I come across a group that's been together for a while, because they've got great stories to tell, and that usually indicates a good understanding of what I've said before. The supernatural is not an on-demand thing, despite what we may see in some shows. Sometimes it goes on full display, but there's a lot of times that's either very subtle or just, that's it. Doesn't mean nothing's there, but it just doesn't cooperate the way we would like it to. But anyway, let me welcome them to the show. How are you doing today? How are you doing tonight?
How are you?
Brian and Linda. Great. And I'm so excited to have you both here. And what I wanted to ask you both, and please answer whichever or you would like, is how did you get involved in the paranormal? Childhood experience, or what happened?
Everything.
Well, yeah, which is true, but mainly it's because of our son David.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And further back, when I was a teenager, I had some experiences. So we, you know, at that time when I was younger, there was no internet.
Right.
You know, magazines and books and stuff, but really nothing out there to kind of explain what I was going through. So I just dealt with it, you know, fear, difficult time sleeping. You know, Linda lived in
basically an Amityville horror.
Oh my God. Okay. I got to hear these stories, because it sounds like It wasn't like, because I've had some people that have had like maybe one or two things when they were a kid, but that was it. It was like a 1 or 2 time thing and never again. But it sounds like you guys, there was repetition in what's going on with you guys.
Yeah,
because Brian had experience, I had experiences when we were young, but then again, you grow up and you don't think about it.
Yeah.
And this is before any shows were out there.
Yeah,
there was, when I was a kid, I used to go to the TGNY. I don't even know if they have those anymore.
No.
But I used to go up there and, I'd spend $1 getting about 4 magazines. They were on UFOs and Bigfoot and ghosts and stuff, but they were really just stories.
Yeah.
So they really didn't explain. It fueled my interest, but it didn't really explain what was going on, what was happening. So as a kid, you just chalk it up to being afraid of the dark. The monster's under my bed, it's in my closet, whatever. But I had episodes of what they call sleep paralysis.
Oh, you did? Wow.
So I was about 17, and I remember waking up in the morning and I couldn't lift my body. I couldn't lift my head, and I was freaking, but I was awake.
Yeah.
And it didn't, I'm in the medical field, so I understand what sleep paralysis is. But this didn't feel like sleep paralysis. From what I've read, sleep paralysis is. This actually felt like something was holding me down. So I freaked out. I called for my mom. My mom came in, and of course, as all moms do, she said, "You're going to school."
I have to laugh because, she's thinking you're putting her on. You're like, trying to get out from going to school. Yeah.
I'm guilty of stuff like that. I am, but this was not. This was the real deal, and it scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
So I had no one to tell, no one to talk to about. It was later on when our son David was he was 5.
Yeah, he started getting night terrors. And then he started walking in his sleep. And then he started having conversations in the daytime with certain things or something there. So at that time, I think, what was it?
The Scariest Places on Earth.
Yeah, where it's on.
Okay, I remember that show. Yeah.
Most Haunted. And then Ghost Hunters at the beginning stages. And we're like,
we started to find more research material at that time. And we started to look up
books. The internet was very, very new.
First things first, we took him to the doctor.
Yeah.
Doctor said, high sugar diet, high fatty diet.
Yeah,
he's not burning off, so he's still got energy when he goes to sleep.
Okay.
The problem is Linda doesn't cook that way. And Dave, to this day, doesn't eat sweets. He's not a sweet eater.
Right.
With him, and we'd bring a big old bag. And at that time, we had a business in New Mexico, and we'd take it every day and put it on our counter so that the clients would eat it because he wouldn't.
You know what? I know maybe sometimes the doctors, they give some advice versus saying, I really don't know, but still, you could be a kid that's got extra energies, but between that and night terrors, there's a big difference.
Well, and then it was just more like we could just see him, he was speaking to someone like that.
Wow, yeah, see?
He would be searching, and he's saying, they're telling me I have to find it. He's digging through his toy box, and he's throwing stuff out, and he goes, I got to find it. They're telling me I have to find it. And we're like, what are you talking about? And he seems awake, but he's asleep. So we'd get him back to the bed, and he'd finally wake up, and then he's like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah. So it was for him to this day. He's 27 now, but he will always remember where it was, Brett. He always feels like, and even our daughter, too, when we moved into this house, there was a little crawl space, but we didn't know it was at the end of the hallway. We just barely moved in.
It was in a closet.
Yeah, we didn't even know it was there. They found it.
When we weren't there.
Yeah, when we weren't there, of course. But for David, he goes, I clearly remember we opened it, and he goes, I honestly felt that we opened something.
We let something.
I've heard of that. I've heard of stuff like that, where people open up some either closet or hidden room or stuff like that. And something happens, it changes. Then they start experiencing things. I've heard of that before.
It was an older home, we're not talking hundreds of years old. Maybe 30, 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And
this recent about 5 years ago.
Yep.
About 5 years ago, we went back home and we just
drove by it,
and there was a lady outside, and we just thought, oh, hey, hi.
That's Linda. Linda will stop and talk to strangers. So she got out, she was watering the plants, and we were just admiring the work that she'd kept up the yard the way we had it. And Linda said, "Hey, do you mind if we take a look?" We told her who we were. She goes, "So you're the Purdys."
Wow. And you're like, okay, is that good or bad? You know, I was like, okay.
But
we walked in, and it was like she did not change anything.
The curtains, the carpet, everything she did was exactly how we left it. And this has been 9 years?
Yeah, that we've been.
That's incredible because
it's kind of odd.
And we were in the backyard. We were in the backyard because there was an old lantern that my grandfather, I got from my grandfather's ranch, and I left it there, and I hated that I forgot it. So I asked her if I could have it. She goes, "Absolutely, take it." So that was very nice.
And after that, she goes,
"Can I ask you a question?" And we're like, "Sure." And she goes, "Is this place haunted?"
Oh.
So she started telling us about the stories that she was having with her son in the same bedroom.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was
doors
pretty fascinating.
opening, closing, things like that. Because this house did do that. There were things that just happened in this house.
Yep.
Can you imagine? I mean, talk about validating something.
Yes.
That's incredible.
It doesn't happen, but when it happens, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. It's like, wow, that was something.
And she and that's, you know, when
you met her.
I mean, what are the chances you go in there, she's got everything the same way, and then she asks you that question, and you're like, what?
She even had still where, you know, the markings of our kids, you know, their height.
Right, yeah, the growth, yeah, the things where you mark off their height.
She was going through a divorce. She and her son got a deal on this house. And the landlord was amazing. He was a great guy. He treated us very well. But she said that she was so doubtful once she bought this house that she didn't know if she made the right move, this whole night. She went and she laid in the bed in the back room after a long day of moving, turned off the lights, and on the ceiling were all the little plastic glow-in-the-dark stars that we had put up for the kids.
Okay.
And she goes, "When I saw those stars, I knew this was the right house."
There you go. Yeah.
And she's comfortable after that. And we're still friends with her today.
Yeah, Facebook friends, yeah.
Let me ask you something. When you guys moved away, what happened with your son's night terrors? Did he stop experiencing things when you guys moved out of there?
Well, he did when he got older, but still to this day, he'll take melatonin because his dreams.
They come to him in his dreams.
We found this out over time.
Okay.
Like what was happening, you know, meeting, just getting into this field, we were able to meet, you know, mediums and just meet people, team members. Yeah, you know, and then we started figuring it out with our son. So basically, he is a medium in some sort of way, but he's able to see him in his dreams and communicate.
So, because people don't realize that a medium and a psychic are two different things. You can be a psychic and not necessarily a medium. So
he said that's the best way I could put it.
Yeah,
right.
They tend to come to him in his dreams, and he remembers it vividly every time he's dreaming. So
which they say that happens a lot of times when you're really young and you start getting them trying to communicate with you, and you're a child and you are basically, for lack of a better word, are wigging out like, I can't take this, because there's no boundaries there. They want to talk about things that shouldn't hear about. You know, maybe how they were killed, or, you know, they come looking really horrible looking, and that's why, that makes a lot of sense as far as a lot of kids. And if the family, thankfully, you guys were like receptive to like thinking of what was going on. Like you said, the first thing, of course, you take your kid to the doctor, but then you were like open to like thinking, okay, so what is really going on here with him?
Well, we've always been that way, and I think that's why we've stayed in this field so long, because we still, you know, we've gotten to the point where we realize there's nothing, we can't prove it to anybody else.
Right.
But we were able to prove it for ourselves.
And sometimes that's all that really matters at the end of the day.
That's all you can really do, because, you know, I tell people, you know, what kind of evidence would you be able to provide to really prove to somebody, you know, that spirits or ghosts exist?
Exactly.
I mean, somebody would knock it down. Somebody would say it's CG or
whatever. Especially nowadays with stuff like that, what they can do with all this, like you said, all the computer programs that can alter stuff almost seamlessly for, very difficult to detect. Let me ask you, Linda, you said that you grew up like in Amityville house. What happened?
When I
never saw it. We met later in life, and she had moved out of this house, and a year or two ago we went to Albuquerque to visit family, and she goes, you know what, we have time, we're driving around, I want to take you by my old house on 12th Street.
9th Street.
Whatever. So we did. We went down there, and I go, you lived in frickin' Amityville 4 house. Because that's what it looked like.
Yeah, the windows.
The same little shape to it, the window, 2 little windows in the top.
Like that Dutch colonial thing, yeah. Wow.
That house had so much going on. I mean, one, I definitely always saw shadows. I remember just things moving around. I do that. But, like, we would have the mirror, one of those, remember those mirrors that were, like, bolted into the walls, where they had all the screws, and it was just, the mirror itself, no frame or anything.
Right.
Old time thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it just came shattered. The screws were there, but the middle just fell.
Wow.
Things like that. We used to live on the bottom portion of the house, and then the rooms would be rented on top.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, in the middle room, always something happened with those people that lived there. We had a couple that was like domestic fighting, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, a few weeks later, they were found dead. We had a woman, another woman that lived there. A few after that, she was like beaten up really bad. It was like this room. It was crazy.
You told me there was a lady living under your steps.
Oh yeah, a lady lived underneath our house.
Your front steps.
She what?
She was living underneath our house, and underneath the house, under the front.
A vagrant.
Yeah.
Like that crawl space that you have underneath the house?
No, they have the front porch, the lattice work on the bottom.
Uh-huh.
Living under there.
Yeah.
So how did you guys realize this? I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but it's
so weird. And I remember going down in the basement, and there was this area, and I remember there was like this hole in the wall. It was just weird. It was a hole in the wall. But I used to always think, that something's there. I always felt something was there, and I would always go close that door. And every time that door would always be open, because I would ask my mom, I remember, like, did you open the door? She goes, what are you talking about?
Right,
my mom would go down there, do laundry, and she goes, I go, I shut the door. She goes, I don't open the door. I would always shut that door because and I can still, in my head, still see that hole in the wall that I knew something was there. But we'd always have things move. Things would always be missing. I would always see shadows. But again, I was a kid, and I mean, it was so weird. I was never afraid.
Well, yeah, that's what I tell everybody. When you're a kid, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? You're stuck. It's like,
Yeah, but we had, lots and lots of things always happen in that house.
Yeah, it sounds like you got that cursed apartment, which was like, you sure you want to move there?
Yeah.
I know. I there's places like that you think, why in that specific? I mean, bad things happen to people. It's not like, come on, that's understandable. But sometimes, like you said, when you see like everybody that moves there, man, it's a catastrophe happens to these people.
Like in that room, it's all bad energy. So anybody that moves there has some sort of
something
catastrophe in their life.
It was.
Did you ever know any history about the house, or was it old or anything like that?
I've never even thought about researching it. Now that you said that, I should research it.
It's downtown Albuquerque, so it's in a part of the oldest part.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if it's downtown, that's usually the oldest part of a city is usually that downtown area. So yeah, more than likely it's older. It's got history,
These homes, like that. In New Mexico or adobe style and stuff. So to see a colonial type or a barn shape is really rare. I mean, those were not very often that you would see those.
Yeah.
Wow.
I need to do that just to see. That's interesting. Never even thought of it. Isn't that funny?
But you know what? And that part where you say about the lady that in your crawl space, because the house I live in now, it's got a significant crawl space. I mean, we don't have basements down here in South Florida because we got like limestone. You'd have to dynamite to get a hole. But this house is an older house, and it's got a pretty big crawl space. I mean, we've got, as a matter of fact, we got lattice. We put up so that we don't get any bigger animals going in there. You know, because the last thing I want is, about the only thing that can get in there is maybe, a rat or a toad or something, but nothing bigger.
Right.
You know, but I'm just thinking, a human being is like, what? But yeah.
Yeah, it was because I remember with my sister, she was on the phone, and it was one with the long cord, and she was just walking in and out of the kitchen on the porch, and she saw this lady crawled out, and she's like, "Mom!"
I swear to God.
And then because I was in the living room, and we all got scared, and my mom comes running out. She's like, "Oh my God!" She's calling the police. Yeah.
Of course, man. Talk about, man. That's like that, but that's a great story. That's a great story. So here you are. Obviously, like you said, you got interested in the paranormal because, trying to help your son. And like you said, and I tell everybody, you know what, when I got into paranormal investigation, which is in the 90s, you had to you had to pay to develop film. People don't think that there was, once upon a time, there was no such thing as digital photography. It would cost you a lot of money. And of course, back then there was maybe a camera. There was not all the stuff that they've got available now. Right. As far as if you were going to do investigations. And even then, if you used a camera, talk about, you had to be absolutely lucky, very lucky to capture something on film. And then, of course, you would spend the money on it. And, and a lot of it, I tell people, the human beings, and I'm not talking about the psychics besides being, you were the best instrument. You sometimes felt a draft, you got the prickly skin, and after a while you kind of developed a sensitivity. If you were kind of honest with yourself, as in, okay, in other words, you weren't trying to create a feeling. It was like, okay, this feels, I'm feeling something, either the, electrostatic charge, the prickly feeling, the cold draft, or just sometimes a really bad feeling of dread. But, sometimes I think that recently a lot of the equipment has taken away from how effective humans are, the human body is for picking up on paranormal activity.
It's funny because we were like, any chance we had, something new came out, we bought it.
Yeah.
We bought it, we tested it out. We have tons of stuff that we may have taken.
Failed.
Yeah, it didn't live up to expectations, so we sidelined. And we had an investigation that we did for a family this past week, and we walked out of here. I mean, we have cases and cases of equipment.
Right.
We walked out with one case, one camera. That's what we took to this investigation, because we found that, there's a few key pieces that can give you information.
Right.
Really talking to the family, listening.
Yes.
Use your senses. That's the best device you have to this day.
Right. Yeah. You try to think of okay, let's find a non-supernatural reason for what you're experiencing. Obviously you want to go down that route. Right. But then, and sometimes it's a question, sometimes it's the timing is good, and you get a lot of, and also, a lot of people, I want to say that sometimes, especially with a lot of the shows, people jump to the conclusion too quickly that it's paranormal or it's a ghost.
Yes.
And sometimes you have to say, wait, let's take it one step at a time. Tell me again, what are you experiencing? What's going on? What's this? What's that? And they're like, no, but it's a ghost. And it's like, wait. Let's.
The shows, obviously, we love them all. It's entertainment. Mm-hmm. And I tell people, because a lot of people will dog them, and I just say, look, guys, our phones ring because it's in the public. It's being out there in mass, and that's why.
But it's our job to educate
the public. It's our job to go out there and say, look, there's hours where you sit in.
Yes,
and you don't,
God, yes.
It's quiet. It's boring.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks you're, running down a hallway screaming because something happened. That isn't always the case. And we tell our clients the same thing. We'll go into your home. We want you to stay there. We want you to be
right.
I remove the catalyst. I don't want to take out people that may be the ones the ghosts are interacting, the spirits are interacting. So we have them stay there. We have conversation. We talk in normal tones, and we just listen. And if something happens, great. A lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times it takes returns before we ever see any kind of evidence.
Right. And I've been, especially if you're talking an intelligent haunting, Well, if it's a residual, I know sometimes it's cyclical. And if you're
Yes.
not there at the right time, right date, nothing.
Yeah.
But even sometimes intelligent hauntings, despite what some people think, there are some entities that do not want to communicate with humans. And they make themselves scarce, especially when there's a paranormal team in the house. They kind of like hide out. You know?
They sense that this is what
they're like a cat. They're like, oops. I'm out.
Yes. You know, you have the other ones that don't, but there's a lot of them that it's almost like, okay, let me just make myself scarce until they go away. You know, and then they don't do any manifestation. They're very subtle, and it's really weird. I've come across that before, or things start happening towards the very end after you've been there a few hours.
They're getting comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're almost like, okay, well, and then things start picking up.
If you go visit friends for the first time and they have kids,
yeah,
you know, friends and stuff, their kids kind of stay in the bedroom. They kind of lag back because they're not ready to come out. And then by the end of the evening, they're out there, you know, they're crawling in your lap. You know, that's
right.
The way,
well,
you know, there were people too.
Well, you know what? And one of the things I noticed, and this was after, you know, when you do X amount of investigations, you start, like you said, you start seeing a pattern. That thing about after hours, I realized, like, once you're there, like, you know, like, if things are set up, in other words, set up, it's quieted down. Sometimes, depending on what time you're there, you know, it might be, like, later at night or early morning, you know. In other words, very little activity, very little noise.
Correct.
And actually, like, the energy level on the investigators have dropped. You know,
Correct.
Either people are sitting, waiting, you know, like, and some people are even dozing in some cases. And it's almost when everything drops, energy level, almost like, you know, haven't you ever heard of people having experiences when they're falling asleep? Like, it's almost...
You can't tell if it's the dream state
or not. It's like when everybody calms down or something happens, that all of a sudden you start, you know, besides the fact, of course, that it's quieter, it's almost allows them to come in and, you know, I mean, there's maybe a part that we don't understand fully, but I've seen that's when there's an uptick of manifestations, whether it's auditory or something that you see or cold spot, whatever, you know, whatever's going on there. It's almost like when everybody brings their energy down, and almost like when you said, when you're like thinking, I'm really bored and how long am I going to be here? It's like...
Linda always tells people, you know, don't be afraid to have a conversation, because sometimes when you take the focus off of them and we're talking in a normal tone about, you know, tell me something else that's happened or whatever, give me more information on it, then all of a sudden something happens because you're not focused on them, so you're not paying attention to them. So they're like, wait, come back over here. Remember me?
When we always go into when we go to a house, when we're investigating a home, I immediately turn on the recorder.
Right.
The reason why I do that is because we're just talking, and then I don't know, you capture so much more, and that just because everyone's comfortable. And then when you review it, and actually we still have to review this one that we just did, I know we're going to capture something because we had a lot of just conversations of them telling us what was going on, and then also just side conversations of just talking. There will be something there.
Exactly. Or you hear like, exactly like what you said, like they're not getting the attention and you hear like a noise, like some other part, like something drops or something that you're like, okay. It's almost like, okay, you need to, you know, weren't we the stars? Weren't we to pay attention to us again? Yes, I've had that experience as well. And let me ask you, and I ask it, how about coming across investigations where that you have to tell your client, look, because you're not going to call them liars, but I don't think there's anything here that's supernatural. Have you ever had that situation and they don't want to take your word for it because they insist?
We tell them, you know what? There's plenty of other teams out here that you bring out. We did not capture anything. Right. You know, we may want to come out again in a few weeks or something and see if the energy's different, whatever. I said it doesn't always happen on cue, which they usually expect.
Of course, A
lot of times clients play it up a little bit. Oh, it happens every night at this time,
right?
And you go there and it's like.
But I have to say though, we are very particular on what cases we are going to investigate for home.
Okay.
I would say maybe a handful, if anything, a year, maybe.
Okay.
But it's because we have a process. We have our case manager. She's also a registered nurse.
Mm-hmm.
So they call in. She'll ask them certain questions. She'll say, these are very personal, and she'll let them know. And she will get that information. And then she's like, this is something more.
There's alcohol. There's drug abuse.
Yeah. Right. People don't that will alter your perception of reality quite drastically. Yeah.
And for us, the big key is when they email or they phone and they say, I think there's a demon in my house.
Yeah, that's another one, yeah.
A big cue for us. And we have people in town that are
we'll jump on it.
Yeah, we'll give it to them. They say that's their specialty. You know, I'm not gonna go mess with something that I'm not trained to handle.
Of course not. Of course not. And it's surprising, though. I have to say, though, and I think I'm not going to say it doesn't exist, but sometimes people go there too quickly also, because I think it's like, do you really realize what you're thinking? If it is accurate, do you realize what kind of headache you're talking about, what a problem that truly is?
Yes. Or just like you said, they jump to that right away.
Yes.
It didn't get bad overnight. It's not going to go away overnight. Yes. And this is a process, and we have to, they're like, well, I just want you to get rid of it. And I said, I need to know what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
I can go in there and, you want to sage your house? Sage your house. I know one couple that did that, and it pissed it off.
Yeah. You know what? And I'm glad you brought that up. Have you ever done cleanups? And what I mean by cleanup, gone in after some team that was provocation, confrontation, or inexperience, stupidity, whatever you want to call it, and then
all the above.
Yeah. Have you guys gone in on a case after, when then the poor client is pulling their hair out thinking, oh my God.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, people call all the time and say, well, we had this other group come out. And I said, look, when you call and if you call somebody and they leave the house 10 minutes later, they're ghost hunters. They're ghost hunters. They want to go, they want the threat of sitting in a strange place, in the dark with their equipment, and it makes them feel good. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not good for you. Right. And then there's paranormal investigators. Those are the people that actually have a plan.
Right.
They're going to talk to you. They're going to try to discover about you, about your location. The one we went to this past week, when we got the information, it was one thing. But when we interviewed the family, it was many things that it could be. So we were like, it went deeper into the family before this couple ever got together, and that's part of it.
And then like for us too, now we do try to research the home, and we do try. It's so funny when you said, "Have you ever tried researching?"
We've never investigated our home either.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you know what, and I don't know. I've had experiences where when you, like you said, you're doing more in-depth conversation, and the client feels more comfortable with you, and stuff, and then you realize. You know what? It almost sounds like you're haunted. You might have a haunting here because they start talking about where they've had experiences their whole life, like wherever they go.
That's exactly what this family did.
Okay. Yeah.
Both of them individually had things going on in their life prior to getting together. So while it's the house, we're like going, and then you have those people out here. We have a lot of new homes, and people are like, something's going on in my house, but no one's ever died here. And I said, well, they have to die in this house. It could be the property it's on.
Yeah, of course.
It could be a lot of different things. That's why we investigate. We need to go in there and find out what is going on.
Right. And I've heard also it's both ways. I tell, once upon a time, when people would say, well, somebody died in the house, I tell them, once upon a time, not that long ago, really, people gave birth and died at home. It was normal. It wasn't, there was not morbid. It was, and then they would even have the wakes sometimes,
Yep.
But then I've also heard that, you kind of think about, but I've heard of hauntings where the death, sometimes it's a neighbor, believe it or not, or an accident on that corner. Doesn't have to necessarily be exactly, or very importantly, what you said on the land. Because
they're connected to that person or something or whatever.
Yeah. But if it's high granite, high limestone. So it's just the energy is naturally higher in that area. The high quartz.
Right.
It could be nothing to do with that house. It's just the location.
Well, I was speaking to a person the other day, and he was telling me how he had, I guess he lived in a smaller town, okay, and there was a neighbor, it's one of these smaller areas, where everybody knows everybody else, and there was this one guy who had a problem with drinking, and, everybody kind of understood it, and I want to say, I think it was, his grandfather would always help this guy, help him, get him off the road, or sit him down, or take him home, one of those things, everybody knew. When the guy died, eventually his house got demolished. He started seeing the guy in his house, which had been his family's home. In other words, it had belonged to his grandparents, and then it stayed in the family. And he says all of a sudden he sees this guy, and he recognizes him because the guy had been dead for quite a while, but it wasn't till after the house got demolished. He had been dead, and the house got demolished. Apparently, I guess because of his problems with alcohol, he never repaired it. It was really bad shape, where the family afterwards said level it. The next thing he knows, he's seen that guy in his kitchen. And it's and I'm thinking, well, probably you didn't live too far away from him. Plus the fact that your grandfather, who was deceased also by that time, was the person that used to help him out and, get him out of harm's way when he was had too much to drink. So people don't understand, sometimes there's tie-ins as to why certain spirits or ghosts appear at certain places. It doesn't necessarily have to be that it was either their house or that they died there or anything like that.
It's how they think. This is how we think. It's it had to happen here. Something had to happen here.
Right. And a lot of times, when we talk about the land, and I don't know do you remember back, I want to say it was either 80s or 90s, it was the... it was that little development in Texas. Oh my God, that it was that they had sold these houses in Texas, and then it was the first 8 or 10 houses. It was you could buy a customized house, and that everybody then started experiencing all these hauntings, and later on, it turned out that the houses or the development had been built on a cemetery. Okay. Now, my point being that, because I was reading up on it, God, I could kick myself for not remembering the name of it. It's in Texas. Wow. But anyway, I think it was initially 8 houses that all the neighbors, and they discovered that apparently the burials had been, it was an African-American cemetery, and that they had a little town, but the town had burnt down, and the cemetery had not been used since the 1930s. It was not, I guess, an official cemetery. It was, but it wasn't. In other words, the developers themselves of the land, it wasn't that they were lying. They themselves didn't know what the use of that land had been for. Okay? And my point being that sometimes even when you go into these new developments, the builder or the developer, whoever does the land sale, might not even know themselves what was there. And you see a construction site have to get halted because they come across a burial site. Right. Well, this is what happened with them, that because they saw that at one point they were saying that they had seen one of the trees, like an old oak with something that was like a marker, that somebody had put a marker on it, but they couldn't figure it out. And later on, it turns out that it was a marker, indicating there was a grave there. And basically how it came about was, I want to say it was either him or a neighbor was about to build a pool. And, they were coming in there to dig. And some guy comes up, a real older man, and tells them, hey, by the way, you know that you're going to dig up some graves. And they're like, what? He goes, I know, because he was an older guy. I helped dig. And sure enough, they brought up 2 coffins. Wow. And that's how they realized, really, then of course they started doing the research, everybody started going back, and the haunting got so severe that they tried to get their money back, saying, hey, we were sold these, in other words, if we would have known that we were buying a house on a cemetery, but they were successful because, as it turns out, the developer, it wasn't that they lied to them, they themselves did not know. So it was not a registered cemetery per se in the county or whatever registered that, and they ended up moving out. There was a whole story. I think they even made a movie about it. God, I can't believe it. And
Find that art, email it.
People don't realize that there's a lot of, even in bigger cities, but when they start out, there's a lot of places that what I call unofficial graveyards where, like out here where I'm at, they had one when they were building the railroads. They had a lot of people coming from different parts of the country to work on these places. And people died or had accidents. And some of these people, the family didn't claim the bodies. And the company, they had maybe one cemetery like for the citizens. And it was like, okay, nobody's willing to pay for it, but what are we going to do with this worker? We have to bury them. So they would just say, okay, that corner over there? Put them in there. And then, of course, eventually people forgot that at one point that had been used for burying just people that had no family or nobody to claim the bodies.
Yeah, basically a potter's field.
Yeah, potter's field, but not even a potter's field, because usually you have cemeteries who will say, well, it's a potter's field, that corner, but this is just like forget a marker. You never know you're going to have a marker there. So
here in Nevada.
This is Vegas. I mean, it was brutal.
Yes.
This town didn't happen like other towns. It was very violent.
Let me ask you. I wrote a book. My first book was about the haunted history of Old West Wicked Ladies. Anyway, one of the towns I wrote about when I wanted to ask you guys was about Rhyolite. Have you guys been out there?
Yes.
Is it haunted? Is it really? Does it have? I know that it's kind of like nothing's left out there, but
it really isn't. It's just a few scattered remains of the buildings that were. I mean,
right.
Well,
honestly, though, we've only been there. I mean, we've been there a few times just to go look at the scenery, but we've never really investigated it because
it's an outdoor investigation.
Right, exactly. Then, I mean, I've heard the typical, like, that they have, like a miner and all that stuff. But, it was one of those, like all mining towns. It built up really quick. And then when things moved off, it just as quickly, even if it was there for a couple of years, then it just empties out because everybody goes off.
And I think it was only there for like 5 years.
Yeah, it was like a really short time period. But like what you were saying, a lot of these places, they have a lot of like violence and because everybody just pours in there, these miners and people wanting to make the money off the miners and,
Well, our ex-mayor, Oscar Goodman, he was a mob attorney. And somebody asked him one time in an interview, can you tell me about, the bodies being buried in the desert around Vegas? And he said, no, I can't. All I can say is there's a lot of holes in Vegas.
I bet.
I mean, and this town is growing, so they're going to come up with finding things out here.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, at least the thing out in the desert is we have the same thing out here in the Everglades, but the thing is in the desert that preserves bodies a lot better, though. The dryness and stuff.
Yep, mummifies them.
But it's let me ask you: have you ever been involved in an investigation where something followed you guys home, or it was like?
Yes.
What happened? Yeah, it was like, it was like, oh, dude, let's not talk about that. What happened?
You can't see the room around us, but we have a lot of glass cases with all kinds of stuff, little trinkets that we've taken from investigations or been given to us, or, we go to these, old abandoned houses.
Well, since Rhyolite, have you heard of, I'm assuming you heard of Goldfield, Nevada?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, we go there at least once a year for Goldfield Days. Our friends actually own a building.
John Escott Bank building. Mm-hmm. And that's a 1907, 13,000 square foot former bank, 3 stories with an unfinished basement.
Okay.
And then really just down the street is Goldfield Hotel.
Okay.
So 2 years ago, they were auctioning off doors from the hotel. So we were like, let's go get one.
Okay.
Got one. And then we got a few other items. And then probably I'm going to say this past year.
Yes.
Something that it was like, it was just very, I don't know, something within our home. You could just feel it and just like
energy change.
Yes.
Yeah. So my son and I were at each other's throats constantly.
Right.
And I was telling my wife something's here, and she's like, no, you guys are just on each other.
Right, yeah, like don't blame the ghost, right?
So Diane, she's a clairvoyant, and we asked her to come and cleanse the house, which she did. And she told us that there was an older gentleman here and a younger girl. And they were in our basement where we're sitting right now. And she said that he is very dominant over her and that killed her. And this was tied to our Goldfield stuff. Whatever we have in here, she couldn't pinpoint what they were tied to, but it had to do with Goldfield. And the girl feels protected by me. So she stays close to me. And the man trying to agitate the men in the house, and then she knew nothing about this. Caused the men to be agitated so that the girl would get away from me.
Oh my God.
She ended up moving them both on. And the interesting thing is,
that's funny when you said about like an accident down the street or something like that. There was another young gentleman that was attached to our son that I guess was a car accident, and he just liked
his life.
Yeah.
He told her, he goes, she was trying to move him on, and he's like, do I have to go? You know, he was jealous in a way of Dave's life.
Yes.
He's got a great life.
Yeah.
So Dave just felt comfortable with it, and he said, go ahead and move him on. So they moved him on, which we haven't had any experiences up there. Months prior to bringing Diane in, I would sit upstairs, and we don't smoke, but I could smell cigarette smoke really strong.
He could.
Mm-hmm.
She's sitting right next to me. She couldn't smell it, but I'm like, you don't smell it? And she's like, I don't smell it. And it used to happen all the time. So I was reading about phantom smells, and it's also a medical condition where you can have either sweet or pungent scents as you get older. And this could be a nervous system issue. So I was thinking, I'm getting older, that's got to be what it is.
Right.
But I was getting this, and when Diane came in and was telling us about this gentleman down here, she said, and I got to tell you this, he reeks of cigarettes.
Wow.
He reeks of cigarettes. And I looked at Linda, and she's like, okay. And then a week or so before that, you finally stand in the kitchen. She goes, okay, I'm smelling it now. I didn't. She did.
Okay.
Again, it was kind of neat confirmation because I knew something, I could smell it. I'm like, it smells like somebody's smoking. It was in the wintertime, so we didn't have windows open or anything like that. It was very strong.
Yeah.
Right. And cigarette has a peculiar smell that when you smell it, it's like...
It's so obvious.
Yeah, and we're not smokers, so it's
right,
like,
exactly. Well, it's really funny now that you mention it. This hasn't happened this happened like maybe 6 months ago. I'm in my office again. Me and my husband were not smokers, never smoked, and a couple of times I would be sitting like exactly where I'm at right now, and all of a sudden I would start smelling smoke like cigarette, and I'm like, when you almost like, and I was like, I don't want to say coughing, but when you feel like, like when you've actually inhaled smoke and you're like, what in the... And I was like, what is this? And I even got up a couple of times because our kitchen is way off. Like you have to walk way back to the kitchen. It's out of line of sight. And I said, you know what? The first time my husband left the stove on, he left, so it was like, I walked back there thinking something's burning or what is this? I mean, even though it smelled like cigarette, I'm like, and I walk around and I poked my head outside. Again, we have air conditioning on. All my windows are shut. But I was like, this happened, I want to say, for maybe a couple of months. It would just happen on and off. And it was like, this is really weird. After a while, I realized. And it was like, and I want to say even a couple of times, when you walk into a room where somebody's been smoking, that there's just a little bit of mistiness. That when you walk in and you kind of like, and I even had that experience a couple of times, and I was like, this is really weird. This is really weird. But, and then about 2 or 3 months ago, my husband tells me his dad passed away when he was a little boy, and his dad was 39 years old, and he had been a super, super, super heavy smoker, like a 2-pack a day, 2-3 pack. This guy was, and he tells me, hey, you know what? I had this really weird dream with my dad. And I said, yeah. And he goes, man, it got me, in it, I was seeing him standing just surrounded by smoke, like when somebody's been smoking. But there was just something about it that I just got scared, because it was like, like this, because sometimes, when people dream of people that are deceased as family members, but in the dream, they're not dead, so you're not really scared. It's like, you know, you miss that part about that they're dead. But in this one, he recognized, I'm seeing my dead dad, but he says that what really waked him out was that his dad was standing like in a big cloud of like cigarette smoke. And he just was like, man, I don't want to that's when I told, and by the way, I had not mentioned anything to him about my experience that I had been having on and off, because it was like, and when he told me that, I said, okay, I'm going to tell you, I've been having these experiences for the last couple of months, and I never said anything to you, but to be honest with you, I never made any connection whatsoever to his dad. His dad passed back in like 1970. Okay. I didn't even make no connection whatsoever. And I was like, and I told him, I said, look, maybe something's going on with your dad. And he was like, well, I don't want to know what it is. He's like, but yeah, now that you said that thing about the cigarette smoke, that's what I'm saying. Especially if there's no smokers in the house, you absolutely can tell the difference when you smell that smell.
Yes. And then it's just a Virginia 2 weeks ago, and when I got home a day or so later, I could smell cigar smoke. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, well, it could be stuck in my nose or something. Yeah. I don't know. I just chalked it up to that.
So, just real quick, are you still experiencing the
No,
cigarettes?
It's really funny. After we had that conversation, because we were even thinking his mom is, she's got Alzheimer's. She's really elderly. She's like in her late 80s, and she's been in hospice. And I even said, I wonder if your dad is trying to give you a heads up.
Yes.
But but the thing is that his mom has been kind of in that state for already like maybe 3 years. But then I said, well, maybe something's imminent, but no, nothing's happened. And after we had that conversation, I haven't had that experience again. I still don't. I even asked him, I said, I was thinking significant date, but then that's the thing. It didn't happen once. It didn't happen on a certain date. It happened, I want to say maybe twice a week. It was like, what? And it was like, and I would get that, when the back of your throat gets irritated from smoke. That's what it was like. It was like, okay, I was like, I can't. And also, by the way, we live here, like, I live on 3 acres, and all the houses are really set apart, so you can't even say, for some reason, somebody standing, my next door neighbor is smoking, and somehow or other, it's drifting, even though he would have to be puffing away like a mad person. Right. I mean, there's no, plausible, reasonable explanation why I would be smelling smoke or cigarette smoke, like somebody smoking. So it has stopped. After I had that conversation with him, it stopped. And after what he told me, I do think it was his dad. Now, why? I have no idea. And, I mean, there's some of those things, sometimes it's...
You just don't know why. There's always going to be questions. Always going to be questions.
Yeah. A lot of times things are not like... And I tell people, I've heard of a lot of people that they move into places, they have experience, they never know the reason for the haunting, and they move out. In other words, there's no resolution. It was like, we moved out. It was like, okay. They don't even have that moment like when you went back to your old house and you had that neighbor or the lady that moved in asking you that question. Yeah. They never, it's like, yeah, man, we live there, and sometimes they put up with it for years. Other times it drives people out within months. Yeah. And sometimes the most they'll get is they'll do a little bit of research and they'll find out, either the house was rented or sold like continuously, like.
Yeah.
And that's the only hint they got. Like, there's something there, because people tend to like cut and leave like right away. Like, forget it, we're out of here. And usually a haunting will do that. There was another one. There was another group that I spoke to that they're out of New Mexico in a little town called Belen. Mm-hmm. And they were telling me that they had a client that things started happening when I think again it was like a crawl space underneath, and they found an old shoe and a couple of other things. And when they brought the old, they said you could tell it was like a really old shoe. And they decided to keep it. One of those things like, oh, this is so unusual. It's an old shoe. And they said that once they brought it into the house, that was what opened the door for a bunch of stuff to start happening to them. And it's incredible because all this time this thing was underneath the house in the ground.
It's just undisturbed.
Right. Once they brought it into the house, that's when things started happening. And you think to yourself, okay, at what point, and sometimes we get into that thing about attachments to inanimate objects, like, shoes. and I don't know if you've had that situation with any of you talked about, obviously, what you guys brought back from the Goldfield Hotel, where I tell people, you got to be careful even from these curbside pickups or flea markets or garage sales.
Yes.
Sometimes you get that great deal. It's not such a great deal.
Yeah.
Right? Well, we did, with this couple that we were just at, we did take a mirror. They asked us to remove this mirror because
it was left by the previous owner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's actually kind of a cool mirror, too.
Why? Because what they kept, this was, they kept seeing stuff, or what?
There was an attachment to it, and
there was.
They were compelled to get rid of it, but the wife was afraid to get rid of it. She wanted to get rid of it because she didn't like where it was hanging. She just got a feeling there.
Okay.
They put it in a closet,
and then they started feeling eerie in their bedroom. Stuff started happening, and she didn't want to go into the closet for anything, and she just felt that it was that mirror. So I said, you know what? I think that's her senses, telling her, warning her.
Right.
She needs to heed that. And they said they're just going to throw it away. And I said, well, I have oddities like that in my downstairs.
Well,
so.
no, they weren't going to. They didn't want to throw it away. And they were like, we asked them if we wanted to remove it.
Do you want us to remove it? And they said, yeah, just please remove it. So we did. We had Diane sage it before we brought it into the house. But.
Right. Exactly. And sometimes it's just, you're better off. I tell people sometimes people don't pay attention to their intuition when they should.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only, and let me ask, when you said that earlier, have you ever gone into an investigation that you realized once you were in there that it was much darker than just a dead person, a regular old dead person, and you had to say, okay, this is above our pay grade.
Yep.
Referred it out to somebody that, what happened with that? At what point or what happened where you realized, wow, this is not a regular old dead person?
Some of those things that we farmed out, the team that was supposed to handle it, they never gave us any follow-up. Some of the people that they reached out to, they said they never returned their calls. So yeah, we never really got any answers on those, which is, out here it's common, and we get a lot of people that call us and talk back, and they're like, okay, well, let me talk to my husband. We never hear from them.
Oh yeah, no. I when I was doing more investigations frequently, I would have that where they call you initially, it's like, help, come out yesterday, okay? And then by the time, all of a sudden it's like, what happened? What happened to the urgency of, I need you out here?
We're the wrong group for that. And I tell people that. I said, look, we're not going to rush out. We need to do some research before we ever go into your home. We need to meet with you. We'll do some baseline readings in your home. We'll talk to you, again.
Did you get that feeling? You get that feeling, too.
We've done it long enough that when you go in there and you go, okay, now these guys are, when people start telling me that things are levitating in their house, their children are flying across the room, right away I'm like going, Ripley's Believe It or Not is who you need to be calling because I don't believe it.
Right. I mean, yes, exactly.
Things happen. I've had rocks thrown. We used to do the ghost hunts at Bonnie Springs, which is an old west town here.
That just recently
got sold and is getting demolished, which is really sad. You want to talk about? They're going to develop. It's a very active place, and they're gonna level it and develop it for homes.
Okay, wow, so that's a shame. But yeah, somebody's gonna get an interesting place to live.
There's going to be some hauntings there.
We've had rocks thrown, and those are.
You can say, well, one time. I mean, this is probably the one time where at Bonnie Springs where we really had like activity going on.
Yeah, something that actually caught us off guard. And that's during October we would have like ghost hunts like after midnight. I mean, because they had the Bonnie Springs, so there were haunted houses. So the activity level was really high because so many hundreds of people went through there.
Right.
We were, and this time the only 2 people stayed and showed up, and it was 2 women, 2 teachers. So it was kind of funny. So they were there. And,
but we still do our hunts anyway, even if it's nobody.
So it's called the Wax Museum. We were in this one section. The 2 ladies were in the left-hand corner of the room. We were kind of at like this little auditorium type of thing. Mm-hmm. Brian was there. And then Joe, who was, if you watch Ghost Adventures, Angry Joe.
Right.
So he was there. Then our son David was kind of to the right, and then there's these long wood benches, like 8 feet long.
No, they're about 12 feet.
Yeah. And I'm at the end of the bench, and I'm sitting down, and Brian has the ghost box going on, and then all of a sudden the ghost box got so loud, like really crazy. Brian's flashlight started
pulsating.
Yeah, it's pulsating, and
it's not one of those you can make pulsate.
Right.
It was starting to flicker in my hand. So
and then
at this very moment, there was like 3 or 4 things that happened at once.
Yeah.
So I was on the bench, and never in my life have I had anything like, how people
remotely
say the bed moved or this or something
right.
like that. I was on the bench, and the bench moved.
Oh.
And it's all old wooden floors, so they're kind of uneven.
Right.
So it was knocking stuff, but when it dragged, it went, and it did it so fast with her on it. She was the only one on it. And what Joe and I heard was a growl.
Oh my God! There you go, God. I was
We think it was the sound of the bench on the wood floor that made it sound where we were sitting like it was a growl.
Yeah.
And then
our son David, he heard footsteps
rushing on
him, and then a rock was thrown. And it was in a matter of a minute.
Split second, really.
Yeah,
and
you know what? That was everything. Yeah, for everything to happen like that something was.
Yes. And then all of us were like it all happened, and then we're like, it stopped, and then we're like, oh my God, we got
all excited about it. And it was funny because the two guests that we had,
they're just looking at it.
They were looking at us, and we go, oh, we started to explain, and they said, you guys, you know how scary that is for us? You have the seasoned investigators.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
We totally forgot they were there.
Yeah, it was like,
we were like, oh my God, did you hear that? Did you see that?
We were all talking about it and stuff, and they were just standing in the corner like, hello. It was pretty cool.
But that was like the only time, I'm sitting on this bench and it moved.
Let me tell you something. That takes a lot of energy. That takes so much energy to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised also that you said that thing that you heard a growl. I wouldn't be surprised that was a growl.
Yeah, and we couldn't discount it. The only thing we could think of, because we tried to recreate, fulcrum.
Heavy.
Yeah, there was no way to pull it with her sitting on the end of it.
Right.
And I'm not saying anything about it. I'm talking physics here. So. Yeah, we tried to recreate it.
And we were so mad because we didn't have a recorder going on because
we just walked in
and
we were just setting up,
and it was just for the 2 guests. It's more entertainment. We're ghost hunting with them because that's what we would do. It was just kind of a bummer that we just didn't have that just to hear our reaction. And
everybody was doing their own little thing when we got in there. Everybody was kind of setting up their own little thing, and then it all happened, and everybody was just kind of freaking out.
Really, that was like one.
Yeah,
like you said, it's how many years, and you only have you can have just so many events, that you're lucky to even have those.
Exactly. Exactly. And and I tell them, a lot of times the timing is like people, exactly like what you're saying, people are setting up or they've already broken their stuff down, they're putting stuff away, or it just catches you unaware. I was telling one time we were, sometimes we would all meet, everybody would come in a separate car and, would say, we're not going to stand outside a client's house and talk, but we would have like a little meeting and we'd say, let's go meet at the parking lot of the Burger King or the gas station, whatever. And let's do like a 10-minute, like, what did you get? And then everybody go home. And I remember one time we did that. It was like really late. I want to say it was maybe like 1 a.m. It was really quiet. We pulled into this, like one of these gas stations with a little quick mark thing, but there was nobody there. It was like empty. It was really, and we're just like, okay, we're talking and we just, we have pulled our cars in and we're just standing outside of our cars talking. And I remember all of a sudden, we had two situations. One time we were there and all of a sudden we hear what sounds like a conversation of several people talking. But you couldn't make out what they were saying. And like all of a sudden you're talking and you're not paying attention to it. But then all of a sudden you could tell we all like stopped talking and it was like, man, we're looking around because the parking lot had been like empty. It was like, and you could tell there was like a dumpster over there. It was like, and we're like, where's it coming from? And we're like, you can tell we're all looking around like, where's this group of people that are talking that we're overhearing? And we're like, try and find, is there a big, like where, no explanation for what that conversation was.
Wow.
Okay. And again, it was one of those things where we all became aware of it and we all said, but did you, and it sounded like more, like at least 3 people. It was like a murmur of voices, but we could never make out what the conversation was. And we all said, did you, and it was like, everybody had the same thing. And there was another time, same thing, after an investigation, we had pulled in and we're talking. And all of a sudden we hear a thumping or like from the trunk of one of the vehicles.
Ooh.
Okay. Like something moving in there. Like, and I remember we all looked at each other and we looked at the girl that it was her car. Like, man, when did you lock in the trunk of your car? And she's looking at us like, and we're like, you need to open your trunk. And she was like, because we're not opening it. It's your trunk. You're opening it. And sure enough, she opened it. There was nothing in there. And when we were sitting there, okay, she just had this, stuff that people usually carry in the trunk of their car. Mm-hmm. But there was nothing in there. I mean, it sounded, I want to say, for lack of a better, it was almost like something's alive that's in there, when something's stuck in a small space. And then she was totally wigged out. And then all of a sudden I remember she goes, this was around the time, when the Beanie Babies were like really the big thing, the big deal. And she had a couple of them that she put, I guess, on the dashboard of her car. And she's like, she goes, I remember she goes like into her car. We were like, okay, what? We were like, all of a sudden she comes bolting out of her car. She's like, the Beanie Babies that I had on my dashboard, they're on the floor of the car. And we're like, the what? Because we were like, it was like one of those things that everybody heard it. And again, you're not expecting it. And as a matter of fact, I tell everybody, this is where I learned to make sure that before I left an investigation, I smudged down my vehicle. Because absolutely stuff does sometimes try to hitchhike with you home. And it was, again, things that, it wasn't scary per se in the sense of it wasn't horrible or anything. It was just so unusual. But my point being, none of us had any type of equipment running. And we had nothing. We were just standing around, just having a conversation. And so the last thing we expected was to have that happen. We were like totally unprepared.
Right, because you left the home, you went
somewhere. No, we had left the home.
They don't know it.
Right, and this was like a 10-minute, like, hey, yeah, okay, well, did you do that? What do you think? Okay, well, we're fine. Okay, look, everybody go home. Get on your way. So, yeah, sometimes with paranormal investigators, the most you got is the other person, hopefully, that's with you that experienced the same thing, and you kind of like what did you see, or what did you hear, what did you feel? And then you kind of coincide and you realize mass hallucination.
Right.
But yeah, the sometimes the stuff is there, but like you were saying earlier, what really matters is that you yourself, you understand what you experienced. And that's really at the end of the day, like, it's like, even if I don't ever capture proof or convince whatever the person that doesn't want to be convinced, I know that the experience I had was legitimate.
Yes.
And contrary to a lot of people, most ghost hunters have a really high bar as far as what they'll accept as valid proof.
Which I think is good.
Well, yeah, no, a lot of times people think that because you do paranormal investigations, you'll take anything. And it's like, no, on the contrary,
You have to, and we have Jason on our team. He's actually a science teacher, and now he's a dean for Clark County School District. And he's the skeptic. He's a tech guy, but he's also a skeptic.
Right.
And I mean, if something happens, we're on the floor. We're, wherever we need to go to figure out what this could be. And I mean, that's rule number one. You have to figure out, can you recreate it?
Right.
Can you create it again on your own by, opening or closing a door, creating a draft or suction or any of that stuff? Did the air conditioner kick on? If you got to do due diligence. It's too often that we see stuff or hear stuff. People will ask us to look at stuff, and I tell them I wasn't there. Right. I wasn't there. I would be doing your evidence, if that's what you're calling it. I would be doing it an injustice to make any judgment on it, because I don't know what the atmospheric conditions were. I don't know where the location is, what the weather, all these different things that play in to what could possibly be.
And they always think they caught something.
Everybody.
Yes. And again, I'm gonna blame, the paranormal shows, because I'm gonna say, once upon a time, people were like, as a matter of fact, they would keep it to themselves, like the haunted house. You didn't want anybody to, know you were having experiences. But, it was like, but people, in reality, and how can I say it? Depending also on what's happening. Sometimes, like I said, if it's residual, or if it's not, but sometimes people don't realize, man, do you realize that if what you want to have happen for it to be a legitimate haunting is not really a good thing? You should be happy if a team goes in there and says, by the way, you know what? You moved that piece of furniture, and now that draft you're feeling is the, maybe it was blocking a draft of, and that's what's causing that, or, whatever it is that they're saying, that phenomena. It's logical. There's nothing paranormal here. Instead of people going, oh, thank God, they're like, oh, no, yeah.
I'm pretty sure you guys, I don't think you did it right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's really weird, and I think again the popularity of the shows, and what they're putting out, it's because I get questions in my field where we work. People are always telling us about what happened in their house. We say everybody has a story. Everybody has a story. So sooner or later, even the hardest skeptic will come up and say, "Okay, I got to tell you what happened this one time," and they have this story. It's just, I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, I'll tell you what, who the exceptions to that rule are? People like you guys. People that grew up in a truly legitimate haunted house, and because they were a kid or for different circumstances couldn't move out. In other words, they were like God. Those are the ones that are not anxious unless it really truly is a true paranormal. They're not really looking for it to have a ghost, because they know what that's like. It's like, nah, man, I already been there, done that, and it's not fun, especially if it has any type of darkness or malevolence behind it. They don't want to have the reveal, which is like, yeah, you do have a ghost. It's like, oh shoot, crap, I don't want that.
Yeah. Some people, Hispanic communities like that.
Yeah.
The Hispanics want out. They want it out. They want to just get rid of it.
Yeah, it's like, yes, exactly. And I don't know, that sometimes I think people also nowadays they don't know how to claim their space as far as their houses. You know what I'm saying? They give it away too easy.
Yep.
Instead of saying, hey, this is your house. It's your house. So tell the dead person. You can start off by saying you're dead. in case they're one of these that missed the memo about your dead part, you know. Because, you know, there's a lot of them out there, you know, that if it is a true haunting, they might be confused. They might have died violently, maybe under medications, anesthetized, whatever. And they miss your transition, but they're still self-aware, and they're just looking like, can somebody tell me what happened? Or I can't remember. I mean, there's a lot of theories as to what's involved when a person, you know, gets stuck or is earthbound. But yeah, I find that I think it's good because it's more mainstream and more people are willing to talk about it. But the flip side of it is sometimes people are too eager to have a haunted house, and it's like, not really, you know. And I'm sure sorry, go ahead.
People are too quick to know. They're like, oh, I watched Annabelle, or I watched. So I know what happens. Look, these are all based on reported stories. You know, whether they're true or not, nobody truly knows.
And it's a movie.
It's a movie, so
it's entertainment.
You know, I always like to pull out a picture of the real Annabelle, and I said, "This is the real Annabelle."
It's a Raggedy Ann.
They're like, "That's a Raggedy Ann doll." And I go, "That's the real Annabelle."
Yeah,
It's they portrayed it. That's a great example of what Hollywood does to reality,
right?
To make it scarier. And that's what all these shows do. A lot of them glamorize, you know, demons. Everything's demon. Everything's demon. I'm saying they don't exist. I'm saying they're very rare. These instances.
And this is the thing that, like, the difference is that, like you said, when you go see a horror movie, you get scared, but then the lights go up and it's it. You go home. It's just a movie. Okay. Let me get back to real life. But if you do have something in your house, what are you going to do? You're living there. You know, if you got a family, if you got kids, it's like, okay, you can't say, I don't want to do this anymore. It's like, how about, I'm sure maybe you have you run across people who, for lack of a better word, dabbled or invited stuff in? Yep. And then they changed their minds after they realized the reality of doing that?
Or they were younger, they did it when they were younger, and something's followed them the whole time, and they're now more aware of it, because it's, you know, either getting frustrated, you're not paying attention, so I'm gonna get a little bit more loud or whatever, and now you're starting to pay attention. Then you go, oh yeah, I remember when I was in my 20s, you know, we, you know, had this big satanic and candles and stuff. I forgot about it.
Yeah, I forgot about it.
Yeah, we get that a lot, you know, people doing that kind of stuff.
Or, you know, just the phone. They use the apps on the phone, or they go buy the equipment, and they don't understand what they're doing.
They could be inviting something in, and that's what people think. It's just a Ouija board. No, Ouija board was a tool. It's what you were using that tool for that is the problem. So if you're using your phone in that manner, or, you know, a shoe, and you're saying, you know, I want you to manifest because of the shoe or whatever, you're calling a spirit, you may get something you don't want. So it can happen with a lot of different ways, not just a Ouija board or, you know, whatever.
Right. And I tell people a lot of times, you know, you could be collateral damage. You could just be there looking, and you still could get an attachment or get something. Just even if you were just there hanging out, like, oh, I wonder what's going to go on. You know, sometimes you just talk about wrong place, wrong time.
The shows, you know, people are a little bit more. You know, I saw Jason and Grant, you know, trying to talk to the spirit. So they get together and they try it in their home. They can conjure up something can enter their home that they didn't expect.
That's how come I just don't want to investigate our home or even when we get new equipment, it's never done at our home. It's always like, okay, if we have somewhere going, we take our stuff and we do it there. It's never in our home.
Right, because you're extending. Yeah, you're trying. You might be testing it, but how do you test it? It's trying to communicate, and sometimes, you're like, there's a lot of earthbound spirits that are not bound to a place.
Right.
They're free floating. And all you need to do is, you might just be wanting to see, does this equipment work or how does it work? And they're like, hey.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that sometimes it could be that easy. Not to make anybody paranoid, but but
it can be.
It's got to be done. It's got to be done in a safe manner, and that's that's the dangerous part of people that the newbies that get into this field because, they want to get a show or they want to get famous or whatever, they go in. We met a local team that was starting up, and they asked us to come talk at one of their meetings, which we did. And, they right away, they're like, oh, no, I like to provoke, and I go in and I do this and I demand and all that stuff. And we were just kind of, we got turned off right away. We're like, okay, these guys they're going to need help on the road because they're going to end up with something attached that
do harm.
They can't get rid of it. The same guy was on Facebook not too long ago. He said that he was involved in a case that was appeared to be demonic, and he took a picture of a book. It wasn't. I'm trying to think. It was a ritual exorcism ritual book,
right?
For use by clergy, and so I'm reading up so I can handle this case, and I'm like going, wow. You can just read this book and you're going to know how to deal with this?
Yeah, sure. You go right ahead and you do that. You're going to get a big old bullseye on your head from things you don't want. But people, I had another guest. He had a group out of Washington State. And he told me how one time his group, they one of these old, hospital asylum things, and they were one of the first few teams that they were allowing to do like an overnight investigation. And he says that him and a buddy went to the part where there was like the third floor. This is where they kept like the worst of the worst in the asylum. In other words, these were the homicidal people that, you couldn't even let them be with other patients.
Right.
And he said how, obviously this whole area already had a history of being haunted because it was a really old place. And I'm not surprised, of course. But he says that at the end of this hallway, he sees what he described as a shadow man kind of figure with red eyes. And he did something really stupid. He provoked it. He confronted it. And he said, okay, this is something. And he says the next thing you know, they were camping out close by on the grounds because apparently this place is like in a really rural area where it's situated at. And he says that first thing, one of their team members saw something in the woods that quit that same day, said, I'm out of here. I don't want to be on this team. Wouldn't say what that person saw in the woods.
Wow.
And he says that after that, he says he went into a year-long depression. The whole team broke up. Everybody went their own way. And when we spoke, when I was talking to him, it was like he was just getting another team back together. And everything was fine. He was doing okay. And but then he's telling me I'm applying to go back, and I'm like, okay, all right, okay, that's crazy. But again, this is when people I tell them, and I want to put on the men because sometimes men do that confrontation, provoking thing, and sometimes especially if it's thin air, and it's like when you really don't know what you're dealing with, okay. Because maybe it is just a dead guy, a human dead guy. But you really, in reality, don't know, what it is that you're coming up against. Are you talking an elemental? Are we talking an unhuman entity, a demonic? Something that's going to take that confrontation or provocation as an invite to, oh, you want to dance? We're going to dance. Yep. And that's why when I asked you earlier about people, doing that provocation confrontation thing, that sometimes they have no idea what a Pandora's box that could be when it comes to the supernatural. And I tell them, you know what? And stuff like this doesn't work like you were saying, people are levitating or my kid's flying across. It starts to unravel their lives kind of slowly, and then when you start, if they ever get to the point where they're asking for help, you go back to the point of origin. And it is a situation like that. Yeah, Ouija board. I went on an investigation and I wanted to provoke, confront because nothing was happening, and I was gonna have the first and last word, and it's like, nah, not a smart thing. Good advice for any newbie or wannabe investigators out there. Yeah. That if you really don't know what it is. Or, worst case scenario, if you ever come across something that you really think, man, I'm out of my depth, retreat. retreat and get either come back with help or refer them to maybe somebody like you said that's what they specialize in.
We tell people all the time, a lot of people always email us. They want to join our group. Mm-hmm. We're not accepting new members, but I always tell them, they go, well, can you give me any advice on becoming a ghost hunter or a paranormal investigator? And I tell them, read.
Yeah.
Get as many books as you can on the subject and just read them, because you have to know what you're dealing with. You don't go buy a gun and then walk into the hunt.
Yeah.
There's rules and regulations, and there's safety. Safety is just as important in our field as it is in hunting.
Yes.
Deer or whatever it is that you do. And people don't seem to understand that. And that's when they see shows and they're like, I'm going to go provoke and I'm going to do this thing and, I'm going to be a big man on campus. And guess what? You're not. You're going to end up in a bad way.
Oh, yeah, but they don't realize that these shows, they go roll in there and then after a few days, they gather all their things and they're off. They're not there. They don't stay behind in that home or in that location. They're gone. They're off to their other, whatever they're going to be filming. So sometimes they're not there to witness what they might have stirred up.
Correct.
And sometimes they do. Sometimes I know that behind the scenes, sometimes they have their own experiences, but a lot of times they just, they kind of like it, but it looks good on TV.
On to the next.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. But anyway, guys, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with me. You guys have been absolutely wonderful. And I want to ask you, for my podcast listeners, what is your website?
Our website is EliteVegasParanormalSociety.com.
Okay, and I'm going to have that link in the credits of the show. So let me ask you, do you guys have any projects, anything coming up that you're going to be doing? I know you were saying that at one point you were doing the ghost hunting, like taking people around.
Actually, here soon, hopefully August, we will be having a live talk show at Binion's Casino. It's going to be
perfect.
It's going to be called Talking Paranormal.
Okay, great.
Be the host. We will have guests. It's an hour-long show.
Okay.
In the Apache showroom. And then afterwards, there's also a ghost hunt as well.
Really? That is fantastic. Do you got a date yet, or just in August? You're not sure yet when you're going to launch it?
I want to say August. I would love to give you the date, but we're just going to.
It looks like it's going to be August 10th.
Okay.
And we're actually sitting in the set. This is these are this is the setup.
Wow. That is great.
We'll be at the Apache showroom, and it'll be the second Saturday of every month.
That is fantastic. Congratulations, man. That's a great idea. That is a fantastic idea. And I imagine maybe you have some Halloween stuff, because that's always the month that everybody's like,
Yeah. And we should do the Las Vegas Paracon, which was a huge undertaking, and we let that go after a few years. But we made a lot of friends in the industry, shows and stuff. So we're gonna, when we get to a point where we can bring those people out and have them as guests on the show, that's what we're gonna do.
That is fantastic. That is wonderful, guys. Again, congratulations and the best of luck. And I'll be touching base with you guys, because I would love to have you guys back so you could tell me what about your talk show and about other experiences you guys have had.
Absolutely. We'd love to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. You've both been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, there we go. So, are they an interesting group of people or what? I think they're fantastic. Personally. God, that's great. So if anybody out in Vegas or planning to visit Vegas in August, you might want to check the dates that you're going, because that sounds like talk about the paranormal and then have a ghost hunt. Now, see, that's what I call an interesting evening. and like, again, they've been around for a while. 2008, we're talking here 11 years, okay? And, you know, this is what I tell everybody as far as, you know, well, I mean, besides the fact, obviously, that, you know, they're married, but, you know, the team, but still, that they've persisted in it. Because it's not the fact whether, it's that people persist in doing paranormal investigations. One of two things happens. One, they either get bored because it's not as exciting as, you know, people see on TV, or, and I think this is really good, especially for teams that are smaller, whether you're talking it's just a family unit or two people, where, especially, you get more selective about the cases that you're willing to take. Okay, and the reason I say this is that people don't realize that, you know, that sometimes when you're brand new and you just started, you know, and you want to take just about any case, you know, you want to go out there and have that experience, you know, even if it turns out to be nothing, you still want to have that experience. And then you realize, you know, after a while that you do this for a bit, you, like they said, you start picking and choosing either the person who you, let's say, pre-interview, something just doesn't seem right to you for whatever reason. Either they're too over the top, or just something is off, something is wrong, that you could say, you know what, this is not really, this is going to be a waste of time. And that's one of the good things also when you have a smaller team, that you pick and choose. Do I really want to do this investigation? Do I really want to go out there and, you know, put my effort into it? You know, whether it's the equipment, if there's any travel involved, and in a way, it's not bad to be choosy. You know, like I said, everybody's really eager when you start doing this at the very beginning. That, you know, you go into a lot of cases, and I've said it before, when it comes to paranormal investigations, yeah, you watch the shows and you read books, but there's nothing like field work. And a lot of the, like, in everything, it's not just paranormal investigations, where you really, really learn is from doing the legwork, the field work, the boring investigations, the ones where there's nothing there, the ones where even if you capture anything, it's minimal at best. And, you know, sometimes you have an opportunity to return to some places, and sometimes you don't. Depends on what the location is, or if the homeowner, and I'll be perfectly honest with you. There's some times that you will go, let's say it's somebody's house, and the time you go, little or nothing happens, because just that's the way the supernatural is, for whatever reason. And you capture very little evidence, and, you know, after maybe you review your stuff and even your own personal experience, like I said, I've been to investigations where, I mean, I knew something was going on. My body was like wigging out, giving me all the signs that I know. When I looked at the evidence, it was like nothing captured, or the other way around. You don't get it, and then when you look at the evidence, it's like, wow, that was happening. But anyway, let's say at the end of the day, you come back to this client and you tell them, look, we captured little or no evidence. We're not saying there's nothing here. We're not saying you're lying. Guess what? Sometimes they're so bent on getting evidence or confirmation that they don't even let you come back a second time. They run off and they try to get another group, because for whatever reason, they want answers right away, or they want you to identify, or they want you to get proof. And same thing could happen with another group. Or maybe the timing on the other group is great. My point being that sometimes you don't have the luxury of being able to return to some location and actually capture more evidence. Again, to say, yeah, you know what you're talking about, we were able to capture evidence for you. It's a very weird dynamic that goes on there. And again, a lot of this you kind of prejudge when you have a little bit of experience and you talk to clients. That's what I'm saying. When you pick and choose, am I going to see this client? Am I going to try to help this client? What are their expectations? What do they want me to do for them? And that's a very important question. What at the end of this, what do you want from us? If let's say, what are you looking for? Is it, would you want to get rid of, I mean, what's going on here? And that will give you a really good indicator of, do I want to proceed with this case? And if you're a smaller group and you need to pick and choose your cases, this is the point where you say yay or nay, and you either pass on it or even recommend them or refer them to somebody else, depending on the answers that you get to that question. What do you want from us? What are your expectations? What do you expect at the end of everything to happen? And I'm going to tell you something. I've been on investigations where it's not really been something really horrible. Maybe a little bit of residual thrown in. And, blessings are done. There's smudging and other stuff. And stuff doesn't stop. Okay, and we get back to that thing that I talk about, that sometimes people think in a poof that just because you get a paranormal team to go in there and do some type of blessing or house blessing or smudging or even clergy, that's it. And it's not like that. A lot of times this is something that they need to carry on themselves, and then it just little by little it recedes. And I want to say, if it's residual or energy based, like just memories that are in place there, they kind of start like peeling away. They start disappearing, whether it's the smudging or prayers or blessings. If you've got an intelligent haunting, you might have an entity that at the beginning is really stubborn and does not want to leave. It might be aware that they're deceased. They just don't want to leave. Ownership, afraid of the afterlife. If you've got somebody that not aware that they're dead, they're kind of confused, but it's like, this is what I know, whatever, I've been here, I've been hanging out with his family. But even after, when the family still does their own thing afterwards, there comes a point where what you do, maybe that entity has, like, I want to call it a moment of clarity. Little by little, where all of a sudden, one of two things, depending how long this person might have been deceased. Maybe they had forgotten who they were, what happened to them. Little by little, their memory comes back. Or maybe they died under circumstances that they didn't want to die. Maybe they were young, or they didn't think it was fair. They got sick. They're kind of stuck in a loop of, it's not fair, I'm not dead. And it's like, almost when that family, where it exists in, not what we see with our eyes, like in a metaphysical space, it almost allows that entity to gain a clarity or an acceptance of what is really happened to them. And once that happens, it allows them to kind of see when maybe their loved ones come for them. Sometimes, when a person is so caught up in their head, and they don't want to see what's in front of them. I want to say that this is what happens sometimes with these ghost, earthbound entities. And it's almost like when people pray for them, you smudge, you have blessings, and you're telling them, you be on your way, peace be with you. That all of a sudden is like a process. Like all of a sudden they might start thinking, what? Maybe I am dead, maybe, or they start having memories maybe of what happened, and they almost allowed sometimes to actually, and I think that once they start coming around to it, let's go with the scenario that you've got an entity that didn't want to accept they were dead, suspected it but never want to accept it. Like, one of those things that if I say yeah, then it'll be so, and then what? And it's almost like when you have critical mass, when you push on something heavy, and at the beginning it doesn't feel like it's moving, and then all of a sudden it moves, you dislodge it, you've reached critical mass. It's the same thing, where you get to that point where that soul, something happens little by little, where there's acceptance, with that acceptance comes the ability to maybe see when loved ones come for them and say, come with us. It's okay. Nothing to be afraid of. We've been trying to get you to come over for a long time. You know, the letting go, the shedding of what I call the ego, which is, I'm going to be okay. Or if that was, let's say it was where they lived, I don't need the house anymore because, you know, all those concerns that we have as live human beings, they don't matter anymore. And you realize it. So leaving everything behind doesn't really matter. You know, sometimes including that feeling, let's say, of being earthbound, like, oh, why did I die? It wasn't fair, or I shouldn't have died when I was young, or why did I get sick, or, you know, this is for instances, but all those things that people get stuck in a loop, it's like, it's not fair, why? All of a sudden, there's like a letting go, like a surrender of, you're never going to have a reason as to why you experience certain things. It doesn't matter anymore. So that's what I'm saying, that a lot of times, and I'm going to say this again because, you know, I look at all the shows, and about the only one that I see that actually gives people homework, kind of in a way, even though sometimes the outcome is kind of drastic, is The Dead Files with Amy Allen, where she kind of leaves a to-do list for the people, even though in her cases, some of the hauntings pretty extreme, and, you know, I'm sure in some cases she's telling people you got to move out, which, by the way, I understand that she's giving it to them with both barrels, but let me tell you something, sometimes that's not a viable option for somebody. Okay, and can you imagine, you've already been experiencing probably something horrific, because believe me, if at the end of the show she's telling you need to move, usually what you've been experiencing is pretty bad. But then to be told, oh, by the way, I wouldn't even try to, there's nothing here that I can really tell you to do to make it better, because this place is like, forget it. You know, your best bet is that you need to get yourself out of here, you and your family, because I think to myself, God, that's got to be such a dilemma, especially if you've got children that you want to, and now you're scared witless, because if you were scared before, now you've had somebody come in there and tell you, oh, by the way, yeah, and I'm confirming that everything, and what's been causing all these things is this and this and this, and probably maybe something non-human, and then you can't move away because just financially, let's say you can't. That has got to be such a horrible feeling, and that's the only part that sometimes I have a big disagreement with about as far as that show goes, because I recognize that sometimes, as a matter of fact, I suspect more families than not do not have the luxury of being able to move away, or it would be like, I need to sell my house before I can move, because if not, I don't sell this house, and I can't walk away from my house, or I don't have the money. You know, I've sunk what little money into a deposit, and my landlord is not going to accept this house is haunted as a way to break the lease and give me back my deposit or whatever. So I'm stuck. Okay. That's the only time that but again, the point being that she's about one of the few ones that I've seen in the shows that actually give people homework to do. And kind of puts it back on them, the responsibility of what you need to do to clear this place, or, you know, even though a lot of times she'll say, you know, you need to bring in this type of person, either a medium or a shaman or whatever, to come and work with what's here. You know, and that's another thing. You know, I guess depending, that's another thing. You know, depending on what part of the country you live in. What if you live in this small to mid-sized town? My point being that the kind of person that she's saying you need to have come and help you is like, not around here, not even close. Like, what do you do? You know, maybe a psychic. Yeah, you could probably entice a psychic. They're more common. But what if you get like some weird, like, tell her, you know, you need to bring in this type of person, and you're like, yeah, I wish, but where do I find a person like that? And willing to come and help. That's another thing. So, yeah, but if you read my last book that I put out, Supernatural Safety Paranormal DIY Guide, I explain a lot of stuff that you can do there on your own. Before, during, and after when you suspect that you've got paranormal stuff going on. Don't become so disempowered or throw up your hands and say, oh, that's it. I'm doomed. I'm never, my life is never going to be the same again. Not really. There's a lot of things that you can do. And in the book, I specify which are the couple of situations where it's like, stop, don't do anything yourself. You need to get help. If this and this and this is happening, then you need to get help. And even then, okay, there's a difference between I'm going to actively try to get rid of this entity versus I'm going to do spiritual self-care or protection for myself. And believe it or not, sometimes that pushes stuff away. It pushes them out. It diminishes the activity. Okay? The thing is, you can't become complacent and say, oh, it's gone, or oh, it stopped, or it slowed down, because what will happen is it will pick up steam again. So it's, if you need help, you need help. But there's a lot of stuff that you can and should do. And like I say, you know what? Whoever you get in there, whether it's clergy or paranormal group, they're going to be there for one day, a few hours, whatever. The one that's living there is you and your family, or whatever the case might be. So that there's things, believe me, helplessness is, of things that you could do. As a matter of fact, in some cases, let's say you get to, let's go down with a scenario where, whatever's here is really dark. And maybe I've already had clergy come over, blessings and saging, and all it does is slow it down. But whatever's here is like, but I, in other words, and even if I could, I just don't want to live in this place anymore. I just do not want to live here anymore, even if it gets cleared, because I've got PTSD for this place. I don't want to stay here anymore. I've heard that sometimes stuff like this, that some of the recommendations I have in the book, it almost like allows you to put that house and sell it. Because I have had a lot of cases where people will say that they've been trying to get rid of property and they can't sell it. Because whatever is happening there, whatever is there, which of course is intelligent, this is not going to happen with a residual haunting, almost blocks the sale of the house. And you could ask yourself, which I don't have the answer to, how they can manipulate things, but yeah. But there's stuff that you could do to slow it down, to kind of like push it back so that you could get the sale of the house done. Have people come and look at it. And of course, I know every state has different laws pertaining to disclosure on haunted houses. So that's something you would have to look up depending on where you live. So you can get the hell out of Dodge. So the point being, go buy my book. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for being part of my audience. You are wonderful. I hope you like this interview. Go visit them. I'm going to have a link in the credits of the show. And I've got a lot of fantastic guests coming on. So make sure you subscribe. You get notifications wherever it is that you're finding us, whether it's on YouTube or any of the podcast platforms. Make sure to get notifications, and that way you're on the up and up with every show that I put out. Take care.